So I wanted to take a few minutes to speak to you about what it means to you to engage. And I'll just give a quick preamble that for most people, when they hear that word, it means we're taking some form of very active stance. We're engaging in demonstrations, we're engaging in concerted action that's very dynamic and very energetic. And I know you do a lot of that and would love to hear your thoughts on that. But I'm also very curious about engaging on other levels as a contemplative, as a meditator, as someone that engages with the mystic wellspring. I'm curious on your take on both of those initially, and then we'll see where this conversation goes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me into the conversation about engaging and engagement. And from a Buddhist perspective, I'll say that at least in the Mahayana traditions, in particular in the Plum Village tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, he is credited for the term Engaged Buddhism. So I'll first talk about it from that point of view, because that indicates a different kind of Buddhism, one that is not solely focused on the experiences that arise in meditation, but also how do we take what we cultivate in meditation and be active in the world in a way that is beneficial for the well-being of others. And I think this realization came to him when he was in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and the monks were meditating and the bombs were falling, and the question arose, what are we doing, right? We're sitting and our country people are being massacred. What are we doing? What should we be doing? And so then Thich Nhat Hanh started a social work organization, and then it just went from there. So engagement doesn't have to be separate from a lifestyle, if you will, of contemplation, but we're typically not in contemplation 24 hours a day, right? So we may sleep 6 to 8 hours. We may be in contemplation or contemplative practices for an hour, 2 hours, 15 minutes, what have you. And then there's the rest of our day. And how are we bringing what we practice into our everyday activities? So sometimes people define engagement, like you said, with all this dynamic energy, vocality, movement, marching, writing letters frantically, and with a lot of frenzy. But there's also mindful engagement, going back to the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition of the practice of gathas, having a mantra of mindfulness for every activity we are engaged in. For example, aware of the fact that you and I are speaking to one another. How do I ensure that what I say is beneficial? And how do I ensure that I'm listening in a way that receives your whole humanity? So that could be a gatha that I would adopt in dialogue. And that too is engaged Buddhism, paying attention to how we are relating to one another and practicing mindfulness at the same time. We are living in a society. Let me back up and say, I think that we're living on a planet. And if we're paying attention to what's happening in terms of climate change, it is enough to make us want to disengage. Right? It is fear producing, anxiety provoking. It is stirring up a lot of existential angst. And if we're not prepared to deal with these things, it's very reasonable to want to disengage, right? And some might even go to the extent of dissociation, right? I will not be a part of this reality. all in the service of surviving. How can I best keep my wits about me when the planet's on fire, right? So this is what's happening right now. I think that with some practice, some cultivation, some understanding of the fact that it is not for us to be on this planet permanently. That's a fact, right? That we know that. How can I be with the onslaught of these existential threats and still practice mindfulness, still be a contemplative, still be about the service to others without freaking out about the fact that I'm probably not going to be here much longer, given these threats. So, how do I engage in a way that is beneficial, but also is consistent with the reality that we're living with? Right? We know that water sources are drying up. We should be thinking about technologies for potable water. Um, as a consequence of water drying up, crops can't be watered as they were before. We should be thinking about food sources that require less water. Right? And so these are other ways of engaging for the well-being of others.
So there's two different directions that I'm curious to explore. And the first is as a spiritual companion yourself in various ways, right? In various professional guises, as an engaged Buddhist, as a psychotherapist, in many different ways. And given what you've just said about the challenges that are facing us in terms of climate change, in terms of social strife, and the very tribal, intensely dangerous tribal moment that we're going through, what would you say to other spiritual companions, other spiritual directors who are really wrestling with how do I engage with the people who come to me in a way that is meaningful and appropriate to these difficult circumstances? And I'll just add the caveat about, with the possibility that at any moment we're not here, none of us anymore. What does it mean to engage as a spiritual companion in these difficult times?
Yeah, I would think that the one thing we should be aware of is what are the ways that we are complicit, if you will, in us in spiritual bypass. Because what we're facing right now is heavy. It's heavy stuff. And I don't think many of us were brought up by our parents to be able to deal with it. Right? It's like, honey, one day this planet and its inhabitants may be destroyed. I just want to let you know that. That's that's too heavy for a child. And so we go through our lives even avoiding that conversation in our teens, our early adulthood. And it's just now, report after report after report, documentary after documentary after documentary, news report after news report, in order to get us to understand the damage that we've done. The damage that we've done, what is reversible and what isn't, to be able to accept what isn't reversible and to work on that which is reversible. So if someone comes to us for accompaniment and they are not, not bringing these issues to the relationship, to the work, I don't know if it's our duty to remind them of how dangerous our existential situation is. Especially if we just haven't done that pre-work that needs to be done to be able to accept the situation. But I think if we pay attention to our own desire to disengage or dissociate from the reality and somehow consciously or unconsciously make that the should, like that's the norm, that's how people should be operating, this is how we should be protecting our psyches and so on. And then when the person we accompany brings it up and we have an initial tightness around the fact that they're dealing with something that we refuse to deal with. Right? And then we find ourselves distancing ourselves from that person and maybe even imposing a particular coping mechanism or worldview on that person. I think that's what we should be aware of, that each one of us is coping with this situation, these situations, in the best ways we know how.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I think a lot of it is I agree with you in Buddhism, upaya, right? Skillful means and meeting each person where they are at. And also modeling the best that we can, because that's all we can do is to be the best we can at whatever stage we might be at. I also wanted to talk a little bit about shyness. And shyness is, or introversion, maybe introversion is a better word. So many of the spiritual directors and spiritual companions in our organization, and I would say in general, are deeply contemplative, reflective types who sometimes struggle to communicate their deep love and their deep empathy to others because they are so introverted. And they sometimes, I know this because they email me about this going, especially over the last couple of years during the COVID crisis going, I don't know what is mine to do. It's hard for me to get out of my shell and engage as a shy person with the world in a way that is meaningful and impactful. And so, can you talk a little bit about meaning and impact for introverts?
Hmm. When when you mentioned the word shy, I smiled immediately because I'm a shy person, even though people don't experience that about me. I am really deep down in my core a shy person, and I think it's because my father died when he was young. He was 35. I was 8, and it was an immediate death that shook our family into silence, and we were silent about it for decades. Um, and that's what I attribute to my being shy. Um, my shyness was, like I say, manifested in things like not wanting to engage in small talk at a party, feeling very awkward, to not wanting to give public talks. I mean, I would sweat from head to toe over the thought of giving a public talk. So just paralyzed by shyness and introversion. And then I was, let's see, in my mid-20s, early to mid-20s, I was an intern for the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU. And I was surrounded by lawyers. And I thought, you know what, I have a lot that I care about and a lot of things that I want to speak to, but I'm afraid to speak to it because I don't feel like I know what to say. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know to whom I should say these things. And so I'll just kind of stay in the background and support those who are confident in speaking. And then I thought, you know what? They have something, they have something that I don't have, but maybe I can get it. And I decided to go to law school. Now, for a lot of people, they don't have to go to law school to learn to be a better public speaker. I mean, I also went to Toastmasters twice. This is so I did a lot of work to be able to speak my mind and my heart. I would just suggest that if the introversion seems to be getting in the way of people having a public voice, that they do the work. Just do the work. Just complaining about it, feeling paralyzed by it or entrapped by it is not going to be enough. Join a Toastmasters group, commit to the 10-week program that they have, at the basic level, or something else that requires you to speak in front of an audience and receive feedback so that you can continue to grow in that. And that is a way to move from an introversion that is not productive in the areas of engagement to one that is more productive because it really doesn't require us to be eloquent. It just requires us, these times require us to be vocal. And then we can be vocal in writing too. There are many ways to be vocal.
Well, that's really wonderful advice, Ayo. I think that's the, you don't have to change your personality. Just you can remain authentic to who you are, and you may not get up there and scream, but at least you need to be able to express yourself in whatever way is appropriate to you. So thank you.
Right. Even if you don't mind, I'll just
Yeah,
say,
please.
even if it's just a one-on-one relationship, right? For example, if you know that someone is saying something that is abusive or misogynistic or racist or harmful, to be able to say very simply, ouch, man, that hurt. Please don't do that again. You can go a long way with just a simple intervention like that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well, so listen, this a little interlude here. Hold on, I'll pause. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Ayo, for everything you just offered us this morning. It's very heartfelt and insightful, and I'm grateful, and I know our members will be grateful as well for the opportunity to hear it and to listen into it. We look forward to seeing you in May of 2022 in Santa Fe, and wondered if you wanted to share a little bit about how you feel about joining us at the conference.
Oh, I'm delighted. I'm excited. It's we've lost so much over the last nearly 2 years in terms of our ways of life and living and gathering and supporting one another, informing one another, growing with each other. And so I'm delighted just the thought of us getting together in person in Santa Fe, also with the option for a hybrid conference for people who can't attend for whatever reason. So that's the great thing that we've learned, is that a pandemic won't stop everything. And we will come together in the best ways that we can. I think also the topic, engage, is so critical because given what we've gone through, we know that we can't just keep doing what we've been doing as if nothing has changed for us. So much has changed for us. And the situation is called for different, perhaps a deeper or more intentional, or just getting more serious about our spiritual lives. Now, typically these religions that we bring to spirit come out of existential questions. And so I know there are a multitude of existential questions that are being asked right now. What is our role as people in spiritual accompaniment? What is our role to come together to learn from one another so that we can better support those we work with and for, those we serve? This is the way we do it, through a conference. And so I'm delighted to be a part of it. And also to know that I'm going to learn from a variety of people who have lived engaged spiritual lives for decades. I mean, it's going to be a wonderful occasion.